Started. Hi and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining our Refine Wiki webinar tonight. We're going to be covering a lot of our app called Refine Theme for Confluence. And I've had some really great feedback from you guys about how you sort of want Confluence to look like, and also about your roles when you're using Confluence. So thanks a lot for giving me some really great feedback there. But today we're going to try and share this task of building a really kick-ass Confluence. And hopefully by the end of it, you'll be able to go away and build it in less than 10 minutes. So let's get into it. And I should also introduce myself. My name is Genevieve and I'm the marketing manager at Refined Wiki. And if you do have any questions along the way, you're welcome to just enter them into the chat, and then we'll have time at the end to answer those questions. Okay. So one common modern business dilemma that we're probably all familiar with is that often in our organizations we have a lot of teams who end up building up a hell of a lot of documentation, processes. You want to be able to work together across teams, and essentially you end up having a lot of knowledge and information spread across many places, and it can be hard to keep track of, to navigate to, and to work with and to work together on. So this is basically why we have and use Confluence. However, with Confluence, what can happen is over a couple of years, or maybe if you're a fast-growing team, Confluence begins to look really fat. And then what can also happen, and what we often see, is that you can start to have a lot of duplicate content. It becomes difficult to maintain over time, and you might be using multiple Confluences for multiple purposes. So our goal with this app, Refine Theme, is to try and eliminate these pain points and ultimately build a really kick-ass Confluence. So here's a few of our customers who are already using this app to build their awesome Confluence. So this customer uses it more for a project collaboration purpose. This company uses it as their internet, same with SurveyMonkey. And today, this is the question we're going to answer. So before we go into this, I just want to clarify what exactly is a kick-ass Confluence. And, whoops, I'll go back. You guys answered this yourselves when I asked you in the webinar sign up. So I actually said to you, what does success look like when you're using Confluence? And I got really awesome answers, and this is just some of the answers. So as you can see here, the focus point is really about users actually using Confluence. That seems like the overriding theme that I got from the webinar sign-up questions. And so to answer this question, I think, what is a kick-ass Confluence? That is a Confluence that is fully adopted and considered a useful platform. So today I'm hoping that you will walk away being able to create this fully adopted and useful Confluence platform. And the way we're going to do this is using this fake company called Arctic Rim. So this is a gaming company, and they have a goal with Confluence, which is to create one single point of collaboration for news, company project management, for information and documentation. And ultimately, we could say that this is their true goal. And the way they're going to do this is what they did, I should say, is they took their Confluence instance, they went through these 7 steps that we're going to go through today, and in the end, they ended up with this really kick-ass Confluence that users are really engaged on and, most importantly, finding useful. So let's actually break down these 7 steps. So step number 1, Confluence basics. So here's a really nice kind of rule of thumb that you can use with Confluence, and that is that when you're creating spaces, this is something that you might think twice about. Whereas when you're creating pages, it's okay to have a lot of pages and encourage your users to create pages. When you first add your spaces, there's a lot of different ways that you can use spaces. But a really great starting point is these 3 kinds of spaces. So you could have a team space, project spaces, and personal spaces. And for this example today, this is what Arctic Rim have actually done. So they first went in and created their spaces, and they had these 3 different types of spaces in their Confluence instance. The next thing they did was add pages. So a really good tip when you're creating pages is to use page templates. So this means, for instance, say me in the marketing department, I know that for when I create a blog post, it will always have to tick off the essentials, such as the title, the meta tagline, and the key points I'm trying to get across. So therefore, I can create a page template around that, and then every blog draft I create, I am automatically ticking that off. It also saves maintenance, and a lot of reasons to make use of those. A second great useful thing with pages is to use macros. And an additional tip here is to get onto our free app, which is called Refine Toolkit. And this is an app that comes with a whole lot of little tools that you can put on Confluence pages. For example, UI Children allows you to have it to organize the pages beneath that page in a nice little tab. But yeah, definitely check that out if you're not already using it. A third tip with your Confluence pages is to use your page layout. Now, in Confluence, within the editor, you'll see this little section icon at the top of a page. And this is what you can use to set up sections on your Confluence pages. And this is a really great way of laying out content and displaying what is most important at the top and finding a kind of balance on your page. Okay, and last thing I will mention on pages is to use the content layout macro. So this is actually a very new feature that we added in the most recent release of Refine Theme for Confluence 6.1. And what you can do with this macro is basically make content on any page really visual. So here we've added some navigation icons to pages beneath that. We've added a news module, and we've added an activity update. And this could be like a really good example of how you might use it on a team space home. Okay, so let's move on to step number 2. So step number 2 is all about structure, how you structure your space, and the kind of hierarchy you would have with your content, which then helps you create, and also I'll show you how you can create consistent spaces across your Confluence. So with your spaces, as a general rule, it's a really good practice to have whatever matters the most to your users first, and so on and so forth. And this probably sounds like common sense, but it's amazing how often this rule isn't abided by. And it's a really easy one that we can all achieve. Okay. The second thing that you can do with your spaces is to customize the space layout. So when you have default Confluence, it will look something like this. So you're probably familiar with this. And then when you get our app, it's actually possible to customize the space layout. And this is a really great way of using that hierarchy. So being able to bring the content that matters the most to your users to the top. So for instance, if we know that they're always going to navigate to these pages, we put that first. If you know that they'll always search, you can put a search bar there. But in this case, we're on a product collaboration home, and we've customized this space navigation here to exactly what we think matters the most to this project. Okay. The third part of this space customization is using space layout templates. So this is something that you can do only with our product. You can't do this with out-of-the-box Confluence. And what this means is, so say for instance, here we're looking at a personal space, so Sarah Johnson's personal workspace. And here what you could do is customize the space layout so that every individual has the same template on a space. And this is a really good tip for if you have multiple users, but you know they have the same, they're going to be using the same template, and then that saves you a lot of maintenance and time. It saves you a lot of time over time, essentially. Okay, so here we're looking at a personal space template, and I'll show you another example of how you could do it for the custom team space template. So here we've got some shortcuts, the space users, and again, you see the content layout macro in action there. And maybe here you might want to make the project space template look something like this. So now we've got a search bar there and similar navigation to the others. But yeah, tip there is customize your layout so that you're putting what matters most first, and also save that space layout as a template. All right, step number 3 is then to organize your spaces. So I'm going to explain the concept of this first, and then we'll go back to our example with Arctic Rim. So what you see on the left here is what you probably are familiar with. So that's Confluence, a Confluence dashboard, and spaces that sit within that Confluence dashboard. And then you would, of course, have your pages beneath that. So with our app, what we do is we keep that good functionality. So we have the spaces, but what we do is we allow you to organize these spaces into categories, like you see here, which can then be organized into a site. And then if you so wish, you can have an additional site. So in this case, these categories that you see here, they would sit in a top navigation menu within the London site home, but then you could also navigate to the Paris site home. And I'll actually show you an example of how you could work with this, or how Arctic Rim have worked with this, so you can understand it a bit better. So this is what their Confluence looked like when they got it out of the box. So they had a space here for DevOps, they had a space for development, and they had a space for systems. And what they realized was that, yes, these were all separate spaces, but they're actually related to each other. So they wanted a way of grouping these together and being able to navigate to that group of spaces. So they reorganized, and this is how it looked once they had reorganized. So here you can now see these 3 are forming a category. And then it looked like this on their once they fully organized. So those three spaces became the IT category. They also had a marketing category with content marketing space, channel marketing space, product marketing space. And they also had a category which was left for personal work. So that's where you have your Sarah Johnson space, for instance. Okay, and this all built up to become the team site. But Arctic Rim also were doing a hell of a lot of project collaboration that often connected to what there was going on the team site. So therefore, they decided to create a secondary site, which was this project site. And here you can see how the spaces grouped together. So here we have the different projects grouped into a product category. Here we have all the spaces pertaining to the releases. And here we have some different spaces that all relate to the customer category. So eventually, this was how their structure would look. So they have their project site, their team site, the categories beneath that, and their spaces. So the next step for them was to actually build this site navigation into Confluence. So this is how they did it. So here's an example on the right of what their team site structure is. So we'll just look at the team site to show you how this works. And here we're looking at, on the left, we're looking at the site builder view. So what we've done is we've added the project collaboration site. We've also added the Arctic Rim team site. And so here, for instance, we have the marketing category, and here we have the marketing category, and then all of these spaces have now been organized into the marketing category. And if you're not familiar with our products, the way that works is it'll sit over here in an uncategorized box, and you just simply drag it into the relevant category. Okay, so now we can say that we have a really nice site navigation built up. And then when we view that on the finished Confluence, it's going to look something like this. So here you can see Arctic personal work and the individual spaces sitting between that. Here you see Arctic marketing, and they would have the relevant spaces sitting in that, and Arctic IT as well. So very easy to navigate to the content that is important. All right. So the next step is to actually add context to this Confluence instance, because before we're looking at kind of a Confluence that looks a little bit like it could be Atlassians and perhaps not Arctic Rims. So this is why we want to make it really clear to the users what page they're on. And an easy way to do this is by adding your corporate identity. So in this case, it would be Arctic Rim's corporate identity or branding, and also to use headings and labels. So let's look at adding the corporate identity to begin with. So before they had this kind of out-of-the-box product, they hadn't done anything to it. And then we reach this point where we've added refined theme, so it starts to look something like this. We've created our spaces, we've created our pages, and we've built up the site navigation. So the next step is to actually use the theme editor to add your corporate identity. So Arctic Rim, they went into the theme editor, they pasted in the coloring, and just like you see there, and then they would have saved this, and boom, it's starting to look a lot more like Arctic Rim corporate identity. And we can then take this a step further and make this look really, really neat. Because remember, we're trying to build a kick-ass Confluence that's going to really engage our users. And one really easy way of improving the user interface is using this navigation highlight area. So as you see here, we have a kind of block color banner. So that kind of block color works really nicely with images. So we're going to go ahead and open up the layer editor, and then we're going to add this background image that you see here. We uploaded that, and we'll add some text here to make it a little bit personal. So we'll say, welcome to $ site name. That little feature there is called text variables. So that's a really easy way to automate a personal message. So in this case, it will say, welcome to Arctic Rim Team Home, but you could also make it say, welcome to $ user first name. So welcome Genevieve to Arctic Rim Team Home. Okay, but let's save that. And now you can see it already looks a lot better. Okay. So the next step number 6, is to work with your content layout. So again, as I've already mentioned when we were talking about spaces, the same rule applies here with content hierarchy. So you really want to display what is the most important to your users first. And with this content layout editor that comes with our product, this is very easy to do. And I'll show you how that works. So here is an example. Here we're looking at the Arctic Rim team site home. And here we know that the users always will always want to search for content first. So we put a search highlight there. We know they will probably want to navigate to their spaces, and we want them to be informed about the news that's happening in the team. So we put a news module there and the actual members of the site. And the way we built this up is like so. So here you can see we've got the Arctic Rim team home navigation highlight with that image we saw before, and we added this search highlight module. Here's another example. So now we're looking at a category home. So the same thing applies here. You can open up the editor and add the layout the way you want it to. So in this case, we know that the users will always want to navigate directly to the projects they're working on. So we're going to put them first. And the way we built this up is, again, using these navigation highlights. So we added a section here, and then we would have added 2 extra columns. So we have 3 columns. And then we would have uploaded these really neat images that work with our corporate identity. And then we paste in the link to the particular project, save that, and it looks like this. Okay, the third way you can work with the layout, the content layout, is what I've already talked about quite a lot, and that is your space layout. So I won't go into that in any more detail, but just so you can group it into this content layout step. And yes, final thing when it comes to the content layout on your pages is to work with your headings and add images. So on pages, try to always add an image because it's a really easy way to engage your customers or your users. And when you're working with headings, a general easy go-to formula to remember is that the larger headings should go at the top. So the most important big messages you want to say will be at the top, and then as the page goes down, your headings can get smaller. Okay, so this brings us to the final step in order to build our really kick-ass Confluence, and that is to personalize Confluence where possible. So let's go back here to have a look at this Arctic Rim team site home. And there's a few different ways that we can make this more personal. So the first one is, so here we have the Arctic Rim team and all the users within this team. So what we can actually do in the site configuration is say that we want all of this team, so the Arctic Rim team, when they log into Confluence, sorry about that. When they log into Confluence, they will start on this site, and this is where you add it in. So we can say start site for groups, Arctic Rim team. All right. The second way you can really personalize a Confluence site is by showing the content that's only relevant to specified users. So defining who can see what content. And the way we do that is using view permissions. So in this example, we have Max from the IT team. And what we're going to do is open up the layer editor, and we added a section here, which is going to be a navigation highlight and a link to the IT team home. Because when Max logs in to his team site, he basically always goes to his IT team home. So we've added that section, and then we click this little lock sign you can see in the section, and we would click that and then say, make this section viewable to all IT team, for instance. And then Max from IT and all of the IT team will now be able to see this section of content saying go to IT home, but say Sarah, who's on the HR team, she won't see this. She might see her own version of this, which could say go to HR team home. So that's a really good tip for defining who sees what content and really only showing what is actually important to that user. All right. The last thing that you can do to personalize your sites is to work with the headings. So I already mentioned this before, but I'll show you again how it works. So here we would open up the layer editor. We would open up the navigation highlight again, and here we would enter hi $ user first name, welcome back. So that's a really easy way of automating this welcome message to the user that's logged in. And suddenly you can see here that your user is going to come to a site home that already has a welcome message and quick navigation to the content that they want to access quickly. All right. So once you go through these 7 steps, the end result will look something like this. So here we can navigate easily between the project collaboration site and the Arctic Rim team site. And these are the steps that we went through to get there. So to begin with, it's all about the Confluence basics. So creating your spaces, creating your pages, using the content layout macro if you think that's important, if you think that's useful. And then we looked at the structure and hierarchy of your spaces, and especially that space layout, so how to customize the space layout. And then we created consistency by saving those space layouts as templates. The third thing we did was to look at the organization. So how can we organize these spaces in a way that we can easily navigate to them? And the answer to that is to use your categories, or if you want, you could also add sites. The fourth thing we did was actually built up that site navigation in the site builder. And then the fifth step was to then create, like you have your site ready to go, but you want to add context by applying your corporate identity and really effectively using headings to clearly show what page your users are on. Step number 6 was to work with your content layout and showing what is important to your users at the top. What they navigate to goes at the top. If they're going to search, this goes at the top. And then the final step was to personalize. So this was a few different tips and ways that you could show that content in a way that is useful to that particular user. All right. So hopefully you can go away with these 7 steps and build up your own Confluence, or maybe if you're already using our product, you'll be able to make some improvements here or there. And if you want some sort of inspiration, we have a lot of really nice sites set up on our demo site, which is confluence.refinewiki.com. So you're welcome to go there and learn a bit from that. And along the way, if you get stuck, we have this brilliant support service where you can ask technical questions or get help, and that's support.refinewiki.com. So I'm now going to